Hello and welcome to Mostly Minnesota Music Podcast Edition. I'm Ann Tracy and I'm delighted tonight to be talking with Paul Ziba. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here tonight. Appreciate it.
I'm excited to talk to you. I know you just played this weekend, and if I hadn't had a kid incident, I'd have been there. But I heard great things about the show.
Oh, great. Glad to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Always
we
fun
were
to be
playing at the
out.
Hook.
Uh, no, I didn't play at the Hook, but that's
Oh.
okay. That might have been somebody else. You can
All
edit
right,
that
never
out.
mind. Well, we'll
I
just
was at
skip that.
Madison Square Garden.
Nice. Very good. That's funny. Tell You're originally from Hibbing. Tell me a little bit. You've been playing music for a while, and you've got some interesting stuff that you've done. Kind of lead up just some background, because I know you've got something coming out on Friday, but just a little background to start with, maybe.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam. Well, so I've been playing guitar a long time. I think started back, well, I think it was in seventh grade. I saw a guy much bigger than me get slammed to the ground in a football game, and that wound up with like some sort of broken bones and something sticking out of his leg called a femur. And anyway, it was just really,
Oh,
really gruesome. And I thought, if he's that much bigger than me and they could do that kind of violence to him, what will happen to me? So I just remember taking the ball and running to the sidelines the rest of the game and just deciding I gotta find a new gig. So that's what I did. I just started playing guitar as a kid, and it was just fun and my way to meet people, and just kind of what I did. I just remember doing that all summer long, just learning licks. And that was back in the day where I just stay up late at night and I'd listen to a radio show that came out of Chicago, and would come through the airwaves at night. Okay, and you could just hit record on the old Panasonic boombox, and that's this is before digital stuff. So that's how I learned how to play. I never really had lessons or anything, but I'm putting out my third album this Friday. It's called Votive, and I'm excited about it. It's I think probably my best recorded album. I mean, I think we're always excited about our latest release, right? It's kind of lame if you're not excited about it.
right.
So, but I really do think that I've put some energy and thought into it. And, like the other 7 billion people on the planet, I've had some time to think and some reflection time. So happy to get it, put into a permanent, permanent physical product, and ready to send it out there. So I did grow up in Hibbing. I don't live there anymore. I've actually been in St. Paul the last 20 years. I have kids that are college age now. So I have two daughters. In fact, one is in Ireland right now. She's studying at Trinity College in Dublin, and she sings on the album. She's actually got a really, really, really pretty voice. And then my other daughter is at Pratt Institute, which is an art school in New York City, and she did the cover art for it. So, just found a way to get them both involved, because they're both just a proud dad, and how can you not, right?
That's fantastic. We could go down a rabbit hole with Dublin. I went to University College Dublin. So
We did. Oh, exciting.
yes, we'll do that later.
Yes.
Have you been able to visit her while she's there?
Well, that's a whole nother story, but yes, we were just there in March, and my wife and I nearly got stuck there for a long, long time, because well, not all 7 billion people on the planet, but what are we at, about 2 or 3 billion, that we got COVID while we were over there.
Okay.
We went thinking that it was, the numbers were coming down, so we thought it was a pretty good time to visit. And this BA2 variant that's coming across the ocean now really took off while we were over there. And long story short, it really didn't impact me much at all. I just kind of felt a little sniffle, and I thought, uh-oh, hope this isn't anything other than just jet lag or something else. But knowing I had to get on a plane, because the rule to get back in the United States is you need a negative test, which, by the way, is not the rule everywhere, which was frustrating. But we tested ourselves, my wife and I, and yeah, came back positive. But again, not many symptoms, but just not able to get on a plane. So the problem is we were stuck in Dublin, which normally is a great thing, right? Dublin's super cool, and so is Ireland. And but we were there right before St. Patrick's Day, and the price of places started to scoot up. And then it literally there was not a place to stay in Dublin the night of St. Patrick's. So we were thinking maybe we could bug our kid and stay in her dorm, but didn't want to ask. That would just be so lame for her. But we really, we looked over the VRBOs and all the places, and the only thing we could find was some place where we'd have to share a toilet with a Latvian man. So we were just kind of ready to bolt. And the story though, we did test finally the night before. We had to back our flight up 3 days, but just by a stroke of luck, we both tested negative and got on our plane and came back to the United States. But
That's good.
yeah,
No one wants a night in Euston Station waiting for tests to come back.
no.
Oh. But I mean, did you listen to music while you were there? Clearly, I mean, you've got a song on the new album called Irish Goodbye that you clearly have been influenced by Irish music, Celtic music of the British Isles in different ways. Were you able to see music, and how do you know that music has seeped into your music?
Well, I gotta admit, I really don't know Irish music, the folk stuff very well at all. And I feel very lame because we were there for over a week, but I kind of figured out that we were testing positive pretty early on. So, we were kind of good citizens and decided not to spread our COVID around this wonderful little Emerald Isle. So we found ourselves mostly doing the Wild Atlantic Way, which is, you would know, but for listeners, it's just this beautiful, it's like the Northern California coast. It's just absolutely gorgeous. So we did a lot of rugged, individual, solitary stuff that was still great to be there, but not added to the pandemic.
Well, it's funny, as I listen to and this is going to be a strange pivot, but as I listen to the music, there's a line by Yeats about a terrible beauty. And that concept of things that should be opposite but aren't necessarily opposite seems to run deep in your album. You've got love and hate, but it comes up in other places too. And I just want to talk a little bit, maybe even just start with love and hate, or some of the themes. It seems to be a lot about relationships and the full circle of relationships, where it feels like these two are the opposite, but they're really closer than you think.
Yeah, well, thanks for acknowledging that and listening. I think there's a smattering of things on the album, and I tried to, I think overall, try to express some optimism, and I didn't want to be schmaltzy about it, or I guess this toxic positivity is what they talk about these days. But I thought, at the end of a pandemic, it would be, at least in my heart, to bring forth some kind of optimism. So I hope people find that throughout the songs. But some of them take a dark turn. You mentioned Irish Goodbye, and that is something I wrote a number of years ago. 2016, I was diagnosed with cancer. So, it kind of put me in a very reflective state of mind. It's maybe cliche to talk about cancer patients and how they gain clarity on what matters most. But for me, it seemed to do that for me. I was able to put things in a bucket of what matters and what, really doesn't matter at all. So that tune came about. Thankfully, I'm past it. I'm a survivor, and I've been told by my oncologist I'm good to go. But it doesn't take away from the fact that other people go through that experience, and it's obviously heart-wrenching. But love and hate, it's one of the oldest dichotomies in the world, right? And I'm just borrowing lyrically from some ancient Greeks and some other familiar biblical references in that song. If people will take a chance or take a little time to listen to it. There's a tune on there called Johnny Paycheck that, yes. I mean, obviously there's a clear reference to this outlaw country singer from the 70s and 60s. And most famously has the song Take This Job and Shove It. But I tried to, with that tune, reverse that a little bit and highlight the fact that economic message of, being able to kind of tell your boss to stick it, it seems to have gone by the wayside. I don't hear that in country music anymore. But that seemed to be a strong theme when I was a kid, growing up in the 1970s and hearing that theme, but I don't hear it anymore. So I'm trying to, I guess, revitalize that theme in that kind of music.
Can I ask when you wrote that song, though, the Johnny Paycheck song?
That is an old tune. Some of my songs on Votive are brand new. Like the last tune, the closer is called Underwater Votive, and that was just something that came to me quickly. But most of my writing, I'm not the most prolific writer. That's why I'm of the age to have college kids, and I've produced 3 albums. I move very slow. So I hang on to things. They kick around in my brain for a long time. I don't know what to do with them, but mostly they stick around, or at least my rationale is, if this lyric or this melody is still bouncing around in my cranium after, 10 years. Maybe it's like this ghost that's haunting me. I got to get it out of there. So if I get a chance, I'll finally kind of let it come to, let the apparition out, let it come to its full view. And that's what I did with Johnny Paycheck. Yeah, I don't know if you sniffed it out, but it's a tune that doesn't really fit today because it's not, we're not all being globalized. One of those songs or one of the lines, people aren't, when it's good economic times as far as finding a work, it's maybe not for inflation, but unemployment's what lowest it's been in 50 years or something like that. So yeah.
But in the same breath, though, it's a time when people are reflected, after the last 2 years, a lot of people are rethinking how they're working.
True. Right. Glad you said that. Now I've got a good byline for this song. Thank you, Ann.
Anytime. But I did
think a job as a publicist for me.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting. Well, and then you kind of segue to the underwater votive, which again, just that idea of the underwater votive to be, the underwater the votive candle, that the imagery of it that seems like it would be impossible, but isn't. But you got a lot of different I like that I got my wisdom from bumper stickers. There's a line from that song that I really liked, but it's.
Thank you. Yeah, as I made this album, I thought, what am I going to call it? And then again, the optimism I wanted to build in is kind of the main motif. Votive came to mind, and votives are sacrifices or they're sometimes offerings, and they're made kind of with the idea of hope. And I grew up as a Catholic kid, so I've seen plenty of votives in churches, and been on a few trips to Europe with my kids. So we've been in and out of some of the great cathedrals of Europe, and it's just an image that stuck with me. And I think candles are fascinating. They have this timeless spiritual quality. So I thought that has to be the theme I'm going to go with, or at least that's going to be the imagery or the symbol that I want people to pull away from with this album. But what song would go along with that? And the impossibility of or the seemingly impossibility of an underwater votive came to my head, and I just thought that's it. That's the thing where it might seem like it's out of the question, but it really isn't. You just don't give up.
And that's what I really like. It's a theme that I got through the whole, was that it seems like you're talking about opposite things, but they're not. I think with Love and Hate, there's a line in Ulysses about the opposite of love is not hate.
Mm-hmm. And you would know that being from Ireland, right?
But yeah.
Or with your time in Ireland.
Exactly. That's your master's degree in Irish literature doesn't buy you much, but.
Oh, is that really what you've done? That's great.
Yeah, there you go. Well, and that is why I caught so many. I mean, you have a ton of literary allusions through most album. I think you already mentioned through Love and Hate, but I felt like there was some with the haiku for you too as well. It felt like there were some themes, if not direct allusions.
For you, yeah, there's a couple lines in there that I thought maybe would be unusual, or maybe pique the curiosity of somebody that listens closely, because not everybody's into lyrics, but I am, and I'm glad you are. There's a line of turning things around a little bit, and doing some contradictions or paradoxes here. I guess one of the lines is heard the wolf howling at the moon, heard the rooster crowing at the sun, just turning it around, turning it on its head.
The other is One Horse Town. Is another one when see if I have to look down at my notes to make sure I come close to what the line is, but wind up with the horse from the One Horse Town, or there's something about what I like that, the illusion of that too.
Yeah, I didn't intend that song to be dissing or knocking, small communities. It's just that I grew up in one, and there's been plenty of songs written about the greatness of growing up in a small place. But I thought, there's an element of, you want to get away too, and just the feeling to break free from something that's well known, and maybe you actually have some love for it, but there's also an element of wanting to try something new and move on from that. So I think that's what I'm trying to express in that tune.
Well, it must be unusual too to be from Hibbing and to be a musician, because that comes with, you know, that comes with some very famous predecessors. And how do you embrace or let go of that connection to Bob Dylan?
Um, you're talking about the guy that wrote Correction Lines, right? His name's Greg Taberzi, and he's from he's on my album. Yeah, he's also a really good drummer, and he drums on a couple of the tunes. Yeah, so Greg's a really great friend of mine and wrote this beautiful song called Correction Lines, and his lyrics, I think, are pretty, I don't know, they're always just fascinating to me. He's just such a wordsmith. But the other musician I think you're speaking of, yeah, well, the Titan from Hibbing, and I don't know if there's a more famous Minnesota person really, but maybe 26 or 27 years on me. Uh, we did have the same civics teacher. It's a really kind of interesting story.
That's great.
Yeah, how I think this civics teacher named Ray Arneson, we used to call him Sugar Ray. He must have had Bob in his first or second year as a teacher at Hibbing High School, because he'd always tell this story, and he was really pretty, pretty clever, pretty creative teacher. But he'd talk about, and he had a good heart too, because he talked about students that weren't doing so well and what he would do for them. He'd have this little talent show at the end of each semester and at the end of the year. And if you were, struggling, he'd pretty much find a way. You just had to get up and tell some jokes or juggle, or, and he'd always tell the story of this little guy that come in with his harp and his guitar, and he, just show up, and his name was Bobby Zimmerman. And that was his kind of cryptic way, because, we're in 9th grade, and oddly enough, he probably couldn't even figure out who that is until he says Bob Dylan, But that was bizarre that we were able to have a few of the same teachers, but yeah, he's got a few decades on me, so most of them have come and gone.
Well, and growing up in the Iron Range and I've spent some time there. I've done some work up there, so I've been there, a lot of times for short amounts of time. But a little bit like Ireland in that it's a cold place. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's beautiful in a stark way. And it seems like some of that may seep into some of your music as well, just coming from that kind of. I think of the start of Evil, and to me the start of that is unusual, and it felt like it was sounds from the abyss or something, or from an out there, if not the abyss kind of thing. And I always think it's when you try to explain to people outside of Minnesota what it's like, especially overseas, and they'll say, well, you don't have any mountains though. I'm like, we don't have mountains, but we got a lot of valleys, and you especially have a lot of valleys to get a big old hole in the Iron Range.
Yeah, if you've ever looked at the open pit mines up there, they're really pretty fascinating. So you've done that. Yeah. Well, Evil came to me because that's another tune. I'm hoping I'm not putting it into a dark turn here, or real pivoting towards something really too dark. But yeah, after the Parkland shootings in Florida, I think it was in 2018, that just really struck me. I've been a teacher for a pretty long time, and I mean, I was a teacher even back in Columbine days. So that's been in my head as an educator for a couple decades. So, every time that would come and go, like so many other teachers, I would process that with students. And Parkland, I think, especially hit me because my own kids were in high school at that time, or maybe middle school, but they were getting to be that age, teenagers. And it just really struck me. And I just started to begin writing that tune. So that's, I guess, one of the newer ones on there. But yeah, This Darkness of the Range helped me with some earlier tunes on earlier albums. The first album I have is called Mitchell Yards, and that is about a switching station up there. And, I actually didn't know about it as a kid. I just came down here, and I was at an event at this place called the Soapbox Factory. And they were, doing some things to raise awareness of old buildings and places that were ready to be razed and demolished. And one of the stories was about the Mitchell Yards, and it just struck me. And I thought, well, I'm from up there, and why don't I know about this story? So it really kind of caught my heart. And then I wrote the song, and I just somehow, I don't know, it just was a bizarre coincidence that PBS in Duluth at that time was planning to do a show about the Mitchell Yards, and they gave me a call, and it became kind of like the soundtrack for that episode, and it did really well. It actually, the PBS station won a regional Emmy for it for cultural relevance. It's still out there if people want to check it out. You just need to Google it.
Well, I'm going to listen to it again now. It's just and talking about the soapbox or the soap factory. I used to love that place. That was a great place for interesting art.
Yeah, it's just helped me inspired me to write the song Mitchell Yards. And my second album is called The Republic of Kenny. I kind of got away from my Iron Range roots for this album, thinking that, got to move on to something new. You can't do the same thing over and over again. But my second album was called The Republic of Kenny, which I think is kind of a lighter story about just the town. It's a little, almost a ghost town now, but they, somewhere in the late 70s, when I was a kid, decided they were going to secede from the United States. They just decided they'd had it.
Nice.
They were trying to get a water project and some money. And I mean, it's a kind of a boring story as far as that goes. But the more interesting part of it is they crafted passports, and they had like their own money minted. And, they were kind of semi-serious about having this little enclave called Kenny in the midst of the United States of America. And of course, the absurdity is, if the American South couldn't do it, and all the drama and the stuff that went on with that war back in the 1860s, Kenny's probably not going to be able to get very far. But
you gotta love the chutzpah, though.
Yeah.
you gotta love that part of it. So that's it's a fun. I'm looking at my list of with the other. Oh, Sea Legs 10, the tiny ships. And you talk a little bit about the underwater theme and the underwater votive, but I like that. I like the start of that, this kind of seagulls or the birds at the start of the song. And then there's a line about, I love the boating imagery of it.
Yeah, try to, the album does end with, there's a little trilogy of sea songs. So I do Sea Legs, which is an actual true story. Sorry, I'm kind of always taking these dark turns, but
no, that's
that one turned out okay. But my wife and I did go on a little boating excursion once upon a time at a place called Neah Bay, which is way like the northern part of Washington, the state of Washington. So it's one of the most, other than our northwest angle, one of the most northern parts of the continental US. So we did that a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago. And it really kind of turned for the worse, because we were out on this boat and the waves were just crazy. And I did the seasick thing the whole time. And I was on the bilge, the bottom of the boat with another guy. And we were just basically, incapacitated for the whole trip. But our wives were up above and they were catching salmon. So it was not totally lost. But when we got back, we did kind of confront the captain and asked him, what kind of water was that? And he called it confused water. And I spent some time in the Navy myself, but I'd never heard that term. And he said, yeah, it's confused water, where the waves just kind of, you don't know where they're coming. And as you're trying to get a boat through water, you kind of like to see where they're coming from. And he said it was maybe the worst he had seen that year. He was an old haggard sea guy, so maybe I'm embellishing it, maybe making it sound worse than it really was. But I sure didn't enjoy my time. But came back, and here we are. So didn't end in tragedy.
That's good. And then maybe you got some salmon out of it.
Yeah, they do. That's some good stuff there. Yeah,
that'd be enough of a plus for me.
Yeah. So Sea Legs kind of filters right into Tiny Ships, and that's a tune that I wrote, kind of a ballad. In fact, it's the only ballad I've ever written. So that's something I kind of like about it. And I try to be really descriptive in that, just a story about a woman named Iris who's just kind of gotten to the point where, she's having to make this choice, about a love that she has for her man, but he's not available. He's not present in her life. So what do you do in that instance? And the heart-wrenching decision to finally kind of cut him loose, like you might have to cut a ship loose if it's bringing you down.
You've got Astronaut seems to have some, we'll say, cutting loose themes as well. It seems to be about a relationship gone.
Yeah, well, thank you. that's, yeah, I mean, I hope people find that as a love tune and, try to be a little interstellar there with the imagery. And, I'm kind of a planetarium freak. I just love going to planetariums. I don't know a lot about physics. I know it's really all premised on physics, and physics I think is premised on math, and that's definitely not my bailiwick, but I still love to go to planetariums. And I just remember feeling years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that I gotta write a song that reminds me of a planetarium. So I started coming up with some of the stories of astronaut, some of the imagery there. But I actually borrow some of that. It's kind of a blended tune that goes back a couple decades, a song I wrote called Shoot the Moon. So I kind of, played that one for a number of years, and I liked it, but like anything, it kind of like loved it to death kind of thing. So I decided I'd just come on to some new words and some new chords and different tuning. So came up with this new song, and yeah, my daughter sings on it. So I'm excited about that one because I'd like to feature her voice because it's so pretty.
Great. That's great. It's great when you can get family involved in it.
Yeah. She's like you, she's a literature major in Ireland. So.
Well, I'll have to meet up with her. She can tell me all about the new stuff, and I can tell her what I was reading a few years ago. That'd be no. It's a fun album to listen to because it does feel like there's some very definite themes, but there's a lot of different stuff too, and it's interesting to hear how it's really been written over decades, or at least some things have been reworked from decades. How did you choose what to include?
Well, yeah, I mentioned earlier, not the most prolific.
As I said, I thought that's what he's going to say.
Yeah, I've listened to some of these songwriter podcasts, some of these people that write 70 tunes and they whittle it down to their top 12. And I'm just thinking, God, who has the luxury to do that? I might rate 13 and 11 made it. So almost everybody gets to go. It's,
Nice.
Yeah. I just wish I had more ideas, but yeah, when they flow, they kind of, as I mentioned earlier, they stick around and hang in my head for a long time, but it doesn't come easy for me.
Well, that doesn't mean it doesn't come well. You're just not wasting your time on songs that aren't going to make the cut.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's like going to a little school. I went to some little schools where if you were going to be on the team, whether you wanted to be or not.
There you go.
Yeah. No, I think it's a super interesting collection. Super interesting collection, though. And it releases on Friday. And you've got a couple of videos. You've got a couple of lyric videos for Evil. And you're gonna have to write
video for Evil. I've got one for Love and Hate. I'm putting out one for Astronaut, and there's one for Johnny Paycheck. So those are the 4 tunes that I have videos for.
Nice.
So people can check that out on YouTube. And
nice. And keep an eye out on your website, or what would be the best place for them to get your work after Friday?
Yeah, well, I'm on Bandcamp, so people can check out Bandcamp, or they can just go to paulseba.com. And yeah, I do have a website, so they can just go there.
Nice.
Seba, SEEBA.
Nice. And you've got a couple of shows coming up, but the one I made sure to write down was April 16th. You're playing Boom Island Brewery.
Yeah, got Boom Island at kind of midday. So come out and have some brunch. They do a pretty nice brunch there, I think. And then Excelsior Brewer on May 8th. And then I'm playing the St. Anthony Arts Festival on June 4th.
Nice.
And that's at 2 p.m.
Nice. So plenty of time, opportunities to get to see you. And I enjoyed the album very much. As I said, I love the literary illusions of it. I love just that idea of things that seem opposite, but are really closer than you think, and so much of the music I really enjoyed. Yes. So thank you for a lovely album, and thank you for joining today.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me so much, Anne. I appreciate all your commentary, and I appreciate you listening and really delving into the lyrics.
Yeah.
That's what literary majors do, right?
It's what we do.